I'm here with Bill Baker. He is the principal and founder of BB&Co Strategic Storytelling, which is a local business that focuses on discovering and sharing the stories of different brands and organizations. Bill, you're also highly involved with leadership training around the world and communications training. So I thought on those three pillars, let's chat about storytelling, leadership, and marketing and communications, because
Great.
I think they're all super interesting at this time. And it's like this one story has taken over the floodgates or the pipeline, and we can't really get any other stories through.
Yeah, there's never been, I don't think there's ever been a story in my lifetime. So I'm a little bit older than you, but I'm 53, and I don't remember a story that has been so global and so pervasive. A story that we are all not only hearing, to your point,
Yeah.
every time we open up the news, but a story that we are all living. I think the latest statistics are something like 50 to 60% of the world's population are in some form of lockdown right now. So I don't remember any situation in my lifetime where we've all been part of a communal story to the
Yeah.
same degree that we are right now.
Yeah. It's a story that it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you're part of it, and you can understand it. It's not normally you read the news and something might be interesting, something else might be interesting, but this is the one thing. It's almost hard to talk about anything else, right? When you do a Zoom chat or a phone call with friends, it's like it's hard to actually cover other stories.
Yeah, no, I think it's consuming conversation. But what I find really interesting within this larger story of COVID-19, what I'm finding really interesting is the increase in storytelling at a personal level. Like I've just noticed on my social feeds, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, I feel like the amount of storytelling that individuals are doing under this larger umbrella of the COVID-19 story
Yeah.
is higher than anything I've ever seen. And people like, and it's kind of like a breath of fresh air in this incredibly awful situation that we're living in, as people are putting forward their own stories on a regular and more regular basis.
Yeah. I have noticed that. I think it's part of maybe it's multiple fold, but it's like the isolation. We want to reach out and connect. And also maybe it's uncertainty or a little bit of fear. Um, as you were alluding to, this is the kind of the biggest, most intense story we've had, but it's kind of the first time there's been something to be afraid of or something to shake us up, I guess. We didn't have a Cuban Missile Crisis or a world war. It's been easy going, I guess you could say.
As our parents are sitting there like smoking cigarettes and saying like, "Oh, you think you've got it tough?"
Yeah.
No, I know this is definitely rattling us, but I think in the good and the bad is, as you alluded to earlier, the amount of human connection that you see happening, ironically, when we are literally physically not able to connect, is extraordinary. Someone once said, and I wish it were me, but it wasn't, but someone once said the shortest distance between two people is a story. And I see people connecting, obviously virtually more than anything, but people connecting more than ever before. I certainly know that we're doing it, connecting with old friends, getting on Zoom or FaceTime with people that I haven't talked to in years. And there's something about this crisis that is pulling people together and doing so in a very profound way, but also through the stories that people are sharing with each other about how they're coping, or I learned to bake bread, or what's happening with their families and their pets and everything. It's just
Yeah.
a lot of wonderful interaction happening. I think the interesting thing is going to be is this is a big reset for, I think, a lot of us as a civilization and a society. And what will be really, really interesting is to see what we take forward once this crisis passes, because it has to pass at some point, God willing. But
Yeah.
what elements are we going to take forward beyond, I hope, just good hygiene and continuing to wash our hands? But what lessons are we learning as individuals, as people, as professionals during these times? And in my storytelling training, what I'm already encouraging people to do is, you are learning a lot of stuff during these tough times, take a moment, write down a story about the experience that gleaned that learning for you, that created that learning for you, because those can become powerful leadership stories that you can use in communications back at work once this is all over.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I love that line, the shortest distance between two people is a story. Makes me think, I read an article yesterday from a journalist in Wuhan,
Mm-hmm.
because I've been trying to figure out, they are sort of 2 or 3 months ahead of us. So I've been trying
Yeah.
to figure out where we're going. And it was a story of, it was the first time he was allowed out of his house, and it was just for 2 hours. And he went down to the river and just screamed.
Yeah.
He said 3 other people joined him and started screaming, like yelling out at the river. And it
Yeah.
was this instinctual thing. And I love that because it's such a quick and easy way to feel what they're feeling and see where they're at.
But also feel it with other people. Like,
Yeah,
I know you're down in Vancouver, but I've been hunkering down up here in Whistler. And you get to experience that 7 o'clock cheer that
yeah,
everyone's doing, primarily for healthcare workers, but also in celebration of, first responders, people working at grocery stores, the liquor store, very important essential service. And you've told me about how amazing, and I've seen lots of videos about this, how people just say it's so amazing to have that communal experience, whether it's cheering people or just screaming and letting it out. There's
yeah,
something wonderful about bringing people together behind that same experience.
yeah. I've never felt that sense of community in all these condos around here. It's
Yeah,
like a real neighborhood or something. It's great. Everyone's waving at each other.
it's amazing. Yeah.
This is something that you could give some insight, but there's a challenge right now from a communication standpoint, for organizations and brands. Like, I think I've unsubscribed from probably 40 or 50 emails already, uh,
Hmm.
just because it's a store that I shopped at 3 years ago, and they're saying, "Hey, this is our situation, how we're dealing with this," and for some reason, I'm just it's just coming across the wrong way.
Yeah.
There's a need to communicate, but there's a right way and a wrong way.
It's interesting you bring this up. I'm working on a new blog post right now about leadership communication lessons in this COVID crisis, but I'm focusing more on individual leaders because in times of crisis, effective leadership communications is very important.
Yeah,
But and in this huge crisis that we're living in, it's probably more important than ever before. And I don't remember a time where we have been seeing more leaders doing more communicating than they are now, from heads of states to scientists to CEOs. Every leader in some form or some capacity is communicating to some degree. It's the question is who we're listening to and what we can learn from them. And I think there's a lot of amazing leadership lessons and communications about effective communications in times of crisis. And I'm thinking more about, like, you look at Dr. Anthony Fauci, you look at Governor Cuomo from New York, you look to Dr. Henry in British Columbia, people who are doing an effective job of communicating. And what I'm trying to decipher is, well, what are the characteristics of their communications right now that make them so effective? What
yeah,
are they doing? And I'm starting to see some, like, key characteristics of what I think are some effective communications in those leadership communications in these times of crisis.
yeah. For me, the big one that I've noticed is, the leadership by example is something we always talk about, but it's really hitting home, or it really seems effective with, the Canadian guys and Trudeau. Just the way that he said, he comes out every day, he's collected. He says, my wife has it, and she's quarantined, and look at me, I'm calm, and um, I'm isolating, I'm doing the right thing. Not a lot of fanfare. I think he's doing a great job as a leader.
He's doing it. He's doing, I think, an amazing job as a leader. It's interesting when you talk about lead by example.
Yeah,
It's amazing when the White House is doing a daily briefing, and every time you see them, they're all crammed together up on that stage. And when you look at, for instance, Trudeau's by himself walking out in front of his house. But when you look at Governor Cuomo and they do their briefing, they're all sitting at a table 6 feet apart from each other. So they are truly living by example. It's interesting when you look at Trudeau, who I think he's doing a fantastic job. I think the Canadian government is doing a fantastic job. And I think I read that something like 65 to 70% of Canadians feel like they're doing a good job. But I have to say there's something about his delivery that is not resonating with me. And I wish instead of coming out and reading a prepared statement every time, it just doesn't feel appropriate. I kind of want to say, just talk to us. Can you just talk to us? And I think those read statements where he's talking directly to camera, I think those are important, but they have to be done sporadically. Like, Queen Elizabeth doing that yesterday, or Angela Merkel from Germany did a fantastic one. But when you're doing a daily briefing, when I compare his style to, for instance, Governor Cuomo's, and Governor Cuomo just sits down and is like, all right, I'm going to tell you like it is today. And it's not perfect and he stumbles sometimes, but it's human. And I think Trudeau does his message a little bit of disservice by reading a prepared, very polished statement every time. I just kind of want to hear from him, not from a piece of paper in front of them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I've had the same, just overall, I think everyone could shorten their thing up and less mitigation and just straight to the facts. And I think it's a balancing act of alarmism and awareness, and that's something they have to be delicate with. But I think in the States, their whole thing could be 10 minutes, and it could be, here's what's going on, this is what you need to do,
here's what we know today.
And I think if maybe not for the speech, but just to put the mask on as they walk away, it would say a million words, something like that. That's the kind of leading by example thing.
Well, I think that the interesting thing with leadership communications in this time of extreme crisis is you have to balance. It's a constant balancing act. I have to give you facts, but I also have to give you comfort. I have to speak to the head, but I also have to speak to the heart. And I think someone who's doing that really well is Dr. Bonnie Henry in British Columbia. She's not some super slick politician, but she comes out, she's authoritative, but she's also very calming in her delivery. She has facts and figures in front of her, but she's never reading from a script. And it's that wonderful balancing act that she constantly does that makes me feel calmer and reassured, even though I'm still, we're all still kind of freaked out. But at the same time, I walk away like, okay, I did not know that. That makes sense. And so it makes me want to actually follow her advice more because I connect with her more.
Yeah, she's been doing great.
Yeah. I think the other thing too that I'm noticing is someone in the White House, I think her name's Dr. Deborah Bricks, and she is the White House advisor in charge of this whole coronavirus thing. And she is usually involved with President Trump's daily briefing. One of the things that I like about her is, first of all, she does also a great job of speaking to the head and the heart, balancing facts with comfort. But the other thing that she does beautifully well is she subtly, indirectly encourages anyone who's listening to kind of aspire to this higher ideal. For instance, she mentions the word community almost every time she briefs. And what she's doing is reminding us that we are all part of a larger community and we live with other people. And that's, from literally being in the same building as people who share an apartment building to being part of this larger global community. And she has a wonderfully deft but effective way of getting us to kind of raise our gaze above our own situation and tap into a higher ideal before she gets into the numbers. And she always does it. And I love the way she does that.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely one thing that I think this virus is going to bring to front is that we do live now in a global community.
Mm-hmm.
And for good and for bad, I think, I don't think it's about shutting all the walls and shutting all the borders. I think it's just accepting that everyone works together, and in this case, kind of suffers together. But it's one big playground now that we live in, and I think
there's good things and bad things that come from that.
Yeah.
Good thing is we're all part of the same playground. The bad thing is that, like a playground, a virus can spread very quickly from one kid to another.
Yeah,
so we're experiencing that.
and but likewise can trade and business. And I know that you're typically on, what is it, 200 or 300 flights a year?
Yeah, I did. Last year I did about 175 flights. I flew 250,000 miles last year.
That's got to be the moon and back or something like that.
Yeah, I know. I don't know. I'm not doing as much this year. It will
Yeah,
be interesting to see what Air Canada is going to do to their loyalty programs. You've seen a lot of hotels and airlines already get out in front of that and say we're extending the timelines and stuff like that. But so yeah, certainly not flying. I won't be flying as much this year as I did last year.
yeah. It's definitely there's so many new challenges and puzzles to figure out. Do you see any opportunities kind of amongst all that for looking ahead, sort of thing?
Yeah, I think there's this is posing huge challenges to everyone, professionally, personally, financially, in terms of your home, your home life, your family. So everyone has challenges to some degree. I know people who have already lost their jobs from this situation, and it will be interesting to see how quickly people can come back. I do think, in fairness, the Canadian government, and I'm a US citizen as well, I think the US government has done a fantastic job of like getting out there and trying to nip this in the bud before it becomes a huge recession. With
Yeah,
that said, we all have more downtime now than we've ever had before. Even people who are working full time, working from home and having less meetings and being called into meetings creates more downtime. And so what I'm trying to do and encouraging other people to do is to take this downtime, take a step back, and think about whether you want to use this time to pivot in any way, shape, or form. Some people are being forced to pivot because like they've lost their job and you have to figure something else out.
yeah,
But for me, where my business has slowed down significantly over the next 3 months, I'm not flying around. I'm not doing workshops, training workshops for storytelling or presentation skills. So I'm trying very hard to use this time to tackle things that I've always had on my to-do list that I've wanted to flesh out. I'm doing more writing. I'm thinking about what the next 5 years in my career look like. And I'm trying to make sure that I have a plan that one of my daily intentions every day is I'm saying, I want to come out of this stronger than I was before I went into it. And being open to new possibilities and new paths that you take as a result of this downtime.
yeah. I think it's definitely one of those. I was talking to a friend the other night about how if you're a sailor, I think if you're like a true sailor, you probably enjoy when the wind is going 30 knots and on the beam and you're going beautifully, but you probably also in an odd way enjoy the storms where you have to go down and batten everything up and just ride it out, scared for your life. And if you're in the doldrums and you've got no wind, you probably enjoy that in its own way. Because,
Yeah.
you know, so it's kind of the ups and downs. And I think if there's a way to not enjoy this, but yeah, make the most of it, adapt to it, kind of roll with the punches, then you just kind of, it's just going to make you better and stronger.
I completely agree. And I think the sailing analogy is a great one. And not feel like you have to do it all overnight. For me, it's just trying to take like one day at a time. And today I'm going to move the peanut forward just a little bit more along this path of
Yeah.
pivoting and self-discovery. But carving off, what I'm trying to do is carve off just a little bit of time, an hour or two every morning to think about this stuff. And then I get back to the work or I go for a hike or whatever. But just, thinking about it, to use your boating analogy, turning the ship slowly over time, not feeling like you have to tack and
Yeah.
go completely in the other direction overnight.
I have also read a few things saying don't expect too much of yourself to be right now to be super productive or this, lower your sort of parenting bar and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate, and I know that you've been even making things better around the house there. Do you think it's all right to put up here the before and after
Do you have it?
from the shed?
Yeah.
Because I think that's a great.
You mean the one I posted on Instagram?
Yeah, yeah.
I know a lot of people have been doing that. I don't know if you've been noticing, like I've seen more people baking
Yeah.
than ever before. And like, you cannot buy flour or yeast anywhere in town, but people are discovering new things. And I think that's a great thing.
I think that's part of how information travels these days. I've got a live yeast on the counter, which is something I never thought I would have.
Yeah. Like a starter.
A starter, yeah.
Yeah, good for you.
And the Dalgona, the coffee that everyone's talking about, and it's just interesting how ideas spread so rapidly. And but I think the benefit of that will be that the good news, the good health advice is going to get out there also. And
Yeah, and well, I think
thing.
these strong connections that we have, and the virtual world that we live in, and everyone being connected to their phones. And I think we have seen a lot of, and we've complained a lot about people being in solitary confinement with their phones, and seeing people walking down the street, not even looking up, but staring at their phones. And I think a lot of people have put the blame or talked about technology being the evil. And I've always felt like, no, that's how that technology is being used right now. But I'm hoping that human nature will prevail. And I think this is what we're seeing, is that now people are using the same technology to connect with other people more than they've ever connected at any time that I can remember. So the technology hasn't changed. People are just using it for different purposes and connecting with each other. And this is what I hope coming out of this. People are not looking down as much and are looking at each other. I think they will. Like, I was talking to someone yesterday, and like, did you ever think that you would just be craving so much for a simple handshake or a hug with something? And I think because we've had to distance, what I'm hoping one of the things that comes out of this is that we never take for granted anymore our ability to literally and physically connect with other people. And maybe we'll see that on the streets.
I think that'll definitely be a lasting impression.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time there. I know that things are still rolling along quite busy.
Yeah, I've got things to do.
Yes. But thank you so much for the chat.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And happy to share my thoughts. Keep washing your hands.
Yep. And if you want to hear more from Bill, he's got a great blog, and he publishes a lot of awesome content and insights all the time. I'll put the link below.
Excellent. Thanks, Bryant.
Hope to see you soon.
All right. Cheers.